today. So, Jax, I'm going to hand over to you first of all, man. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself, say a bit more about you, and you're obviously going to be talking about stocks. So maybe just give a quick overview exactly of what stocks and shares are in this context today as well.
Yeah, of course. Welcome, everyone. I'm sure those that are Woke Finance Podcast listeners know and recognize my voice. Those that have joined, I can see some people I actually know personally, probably recognize my face as well. My name is Jacques Opoku. I am, as Peter said, one of the co-founders of Woke Finance. I am also a founder of another business called Jacques Financial, which I can see a couple of my clients on are. And in my day job, I work in the investment management industry. My job title is investment manager. I work within the portfolio management team and portfolio implementation team in the city of London. And to answer your question, Peter, as to what stocks and shares are, to make it very simple for those that may not have come across it. Stocks and shares, or shares and stocks, are essentially what we call an investment into a public business. So think of a business that's that's been around for a long time. It's been around for more than 3 years. It's growing and it requires capital, right? It requires capital to grow even bigger. What happens is they speak to investment banks, etc., and they go through this process, which some people might have heard of, called an IPO, and they become a public company, which means you and I, and even Pelumi, can actually go and buy shares in these companies. And as these companies become more profitable, these companies grow, we also do well as investors as well. But of course, these are big businesses. So by buying shares in these businesses, what we're doing is we're actually buying ownership, a very, very tiny piece of the business. But as the business does well, we can get appreciation in our shares, and we can also earn what we call dividends, a real cash flow from these businesses as well. The term stocks and shares confuse people, but stocks essentially are just shares in public businesses.
Well, thank you very much for that, Jax. And of course, our second guest, Pelumi, if you just want to introduce yourself. And again, you're going to be talking about property investing. If you want to give a brief overview of what that is as well, that would be great.
Hey guys, so my name is Pelumi Solaru. I've been investing in property for about going on a decade now. It's something I've always had a passion for, actually a calling from God to do. And so it's, I kind of describe myself, property investors, as kind of ironmongers of the industry, in the sense of it's not flashy suits, it's getting your hands dirty and getting involved and stuck in and actually creating value. You can't do it from a computer screen. You've got to actually go out there and actually create it. And so in property investing, just in a summary, just simple sense, is you buy an asset, you actually provide a service. It's actually a business. And I think that's what some people don't really understand. It's actually a business where you buy an asset and you actually provide accommodation. So someone, a human being, is living in your property. They rely on you for a safe environment that complies with various UK laws and legislation. So it's not a light or light touch sort of strategy or when it comes to investing. But the key is that you provide accommodation and people pay you for that service. And you use that income and also the capital growth to actually expand and grow your portfolio. And that's pretty much real estate investing in a nutshell. And I've been doing that for a number of years. I love it. And I've been asked to come on here and clear the air and correct Jax on this notion that stocks is better when, well, you'll find out at the end of the day, end of the session anyway. Let me not talk any further. Let's just get stuck in.
Shots fired.
It's all love, bro. It's all love in it.
No, thank you very much for that, Pelumi. And for everyone here, just a massive thank you for joining. This will be going out on our podcast, as you can imagine. So when this does air out, for our listeners, wherever you are in the world, just a massive shout out to you as well. Just a bit of housekeeping, as I mentioned. This is recorded for those that are just joining. To make this as engaging as possible, I'm sure you all have questions and things you want to, or comments you want to make. At some point, we'll give you the opportunity to come off mute and literally ask those questions. If you want to use the chat box at any point during this debate, please do just throw them the questions in. There's no silly questions. If you don't want to do it privately, you can message. Sorry, if you don't want to do it publicly, you can message me privately and I'll keep you anonymous, but also ask the question out to Pelumi and Jax. But yeah, please do get involved. Put your hand up at any point if you want to speak, and I will get to you throughout the course of the next hour or so. So I guess how we're going to do this, we're going to do it in rounds. So we've just got 2 rounds. The first round is we basically asked Jackson Pelumi to talk about some points for what they are talking about. So Jackson's going to talk about some points for stocks. He might throw 1 or 2 words of shade towards property, but we'll see what he's got to say, and then vice versa for Pelumi. And again, please do get involved, ask questions, interact. I see you are all interacting in the chat box. Hello to Double Questions, and hello to Rue as well. So yeah, let's get started. We're gonna kick off. Jax, I am gonna start off with you as my co-host as well. I'm gonna let you know, Jax, just because you're my co-host doesn't mean I'm rooting for you on this one, but I have to keep I've known Pelumi for a long time, you know. So
man, don't need you, bro.
Okay, you got this by yourself, right, bro.
Let's go.
Kick off, with your first couple of points for why someone should be focusing on investing in stocks over property.
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, big up the Stocks and Shares Massive. I see a few people in the live. Welcome. Okay, so I think the first one I'm going to start off with is something that might be obvious, but I'll start off anyway. And that's one of what we call barriers to entry, right? So when we talk about the stock market is a centralized market. It's a standardized market. Which means there's something called price dissemination and there's price discovery. To make that simple to understand, it means there's so many people buying and selling these assets that it's easy for us to buy and sell these assets, okay? So when we talk about property and people talk about, I want to invest in property, we all know it takes capital, a huge amount of capital, generally speaking, to get started in property. Whereas with stocks and shares, because of the increasing technology, what I like to call because of better financial inclusion, nowadays, more people have access to be able to invest in these assets in a safe and cheap way. Okay, so I'll start off with that liquidity. Liquidity is a great way to manage your assets because you can buy these assets quickly, cheaply, and guess what? If you buy an asset for whatever reason and you change your mind and you say, actually, during my research process, this thing didn't really work out, and I bought this property and I didn't know that the roof was about to come caving down in the beginning. You can sell the asset. You can sell that asset. If you bought an asset at 10 o'clock in the morning and by 12 o'clock you hear some news that says, this thing that I did wasn't right, you can actually sell the asset immediately and you can cut your losses, and you don't have to stress about not being able to sell a property for the next 2 years. I know people that have had problems with their property and for 2 years they can't sell the property because there is an issue to property, because property is an illiquid asset. Whereas stocks and shares provide liquidity. And because of that liquidity, so the key word here is liquidity, but because of that liquidity, it is easier to diversify. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, and I don't want to preach too much, it says, invest in 8 different assets. You can do so much easier through investing in paper assets, financial assets, in the form of stocks and shares. There are many different sectors. You can diversify by sectors. There's 11 different sectors out there. You can diversify so very well because it's a liquid asset and you don't need a lot of money to be able to even diversify. I can imagine trying to buy 10 properties for the average person is extremely difficult, but it's very easy to buy 10 different stocks. Even if you have £100, you could buy £10 each. So keywords I'm going to use here is diversification and liquidity.
Thank you very much for that, Jax, man. Keywords. Pelumi, did you have anything to just, I guess, challenge or come back on that?
Yeah, so Jax made some good points. And it's always the one that's always a struggle for a lot of people is about the entry. And I always kind of say this is that, I mean, no offense, property isn't for the soft. It's hard work. If you want something good, you got to work hard for it. You got to work extremely hard for it. The deposit, the amount of money you need to raise, you need to work hard for it because it is worth it at the end of it. And I can vouch for that guarantee. Anything that's good is not easy. It requires work. So if there's a barrier to entry, what I always recommend is advising people, well, how can you overcome those barriers? How can you knock down those barriers? What are the opportunities? What are you trying to buy a house that's too big? Are you trying to buy a house that's more than what you could afford? You know what I mean? There's always a lot of reasons why barriers to entry. Sometimes the house that can make you the most is the one that's the cheapest. You just don't realize it. You just want a flashy house that everyone likes, that don't make you money. Now, the second thing is which was the mistake, and I think the people is the liquid nature of property, and that's a valid point. And there's an argument I want to argue against that, which means that although it's a liquid, it does provide you liquidity in cash. So although you have your asset, your cash locked in or tied in, you can actually take that cash out. So if the liquidity is actually being able to sell it. But I don't want to sort of cancel my 2 points, because there are points that rebuke that argument. But I do think that is something that isn't really too much of an issue, because the reason why is also, to be honest, there's so much to be said. There's so much to say, because if I answer a lot of those questions now, I kind of give away all my points. So I think maybe what it might be worth doing is tackling those points as I make my points.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Pelumi. And from the sounds of it, saying that the liquid process is difficult it's a bit long when it comes to selling, but in terms of once you've actually got the property, the investment property, you're getting cash like that.
Yeah, I think the Jack, you mentioned that someone may bought a property and they lost money on it because they made a mistake. That's what you got. You got a plan if you want to go on property. It's not. People make mistakes just like they make mistakes in stocks. So if you make mistakes in property, the losses are bigger. I'm not going to argue that. But that's why you avoid making a mistake and you go in there with knowledge of facts and figures, because you're playing with big money here. So you got to make sure you got big sense. You know what I mean? So, but anyway, yeah, I'll make my points and then we'll go for that.
Pelumi, before I go back to Jax, just on the bit where you said you're playing with big money, obviously investing in property, investing in property is obviously different from your first residential, your first home or so. Can you give a flavor of what that looks like in terms of that so-called big money, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so what I tend to find in the industry is a lot of people want to buy the flashy house, the nice, sparkly, big house, 4 beds, nicely done inside their first property. Now you don't do that. And the reason why I say that is a classic, is the best way to analyze it is a monopoly. You buy one little greenhouse. That little greenhouse, you do it up, and then you buy another greenhouse. That little greenhouse, you do it. Now you got 2 greenhouses. You do up those 2 greenhouses, they buy your 3rd greenhouse. And then what happens, as you guys buy more greenhouses, that's when you buy your red hotel, which is a big flashy house. People want to jump the gun and they want to buy the red house before they've done all the little greenhouses. And that's where they make mistakes. And so that is probably, to me, the best way to sort of tackle that issue anyway.
Love it. Thanks, Pelumi. I can see some people just co-signing. If you want to show some public agreement, continue using the chat box or reactions, however. But no, thanks for that, Pelumi. Jax, did you have anything to come back to that? And if not, feel free to go on to your second point. Oh, you're on mute, by the way.
I said, okay, I don't think Pelumi actually made his 2 points for himself. I think he argued against my points. So I think you need to give Pelumi the opportunity to speak about his 2 points.
Pelumi, go for it, bro.
Yeah, but before we go there, before we go there, so there was Pelumi mentioned that property provides liquidity. It provides liquidity when things are going well. But as we know, and I know quite a lot of property investors and landlords, is we come across some tenants that don't want to pay that cash flow. So, and this is actually very common. So whilst it's all brilliant and pretty to say, oh, property, once you've got it provides you cash flow, it doesn't always. And in fact, there's many situations where it doesn't. And when it doesn't, you're sitting there with an asset that can obviously still appreciate, but it's not providing you with any liquidity, and it's not liquid in itself. So there's that part. The second part is, you mentioned, well, that's why you go to it with diligence. That's why you go to it with knowledge. And you go into anything good with diligence and knowledge. Stocks, shares, bonds, business, whatever you do, your career, you go into it with a level of diligence, with wisdom, and that kind of stuff. That's just the truth for anything. So I don't think that's a valid point. But the truth of the matter is, everybody makes mistakes. We all make mistakes. No matter how much research you do in a property, no matter how much research you do in a stock, there's something called information asymmetry.
I don't make mistakes. I've made a mistake on property. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, I never make mistakes. Let's be honest.
I haven't made a mistake. I'll be honest.
Okay, you haven't made a mistake, and that could be obviously due to your diligence, and that's well done to you. But there are people that have done their due diligence, and unfortunately, for whatever reason, a mistake has happened, and it might not be a big mistake, or when I say mistake, it might not just pan out how you thought it would. Let me put it that way. When that happens with investing in paper assets, financial assets like stocks and shares, that's why you diversify. Because if one of them goes wrong, you have other assets that will actually help you out in times of turmoil. So the diversification element, you can't move it away. And I know you talked about in Monopoly, yeah, you bought the one greenhouse, and then you buy the second greenhouse, and you buy the third greenhouse, and then you buy the hotel. Sometimes when you do well in the game, you go straight to the hotel. I don't know about you, but I've gone straight to greenhouses. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of people do. Like you said, when it comes to property, they go straight for the big boys. So I just wanted to make those few points to counteract what Pelumi was saying.
I beg Peter, let me do my points, man. I need to finish this already. This is taking too long.
Go for it, Pelumi.
Jacques, I'll be gentle, okay? So the first thing is the property, and I'm going to use facts when I'm making some of these points. So some of these points, I'm going to have to, unfortunately, I have to go to numbers because numbers are the fundamental aspect of investing. Jackson knows this. So it's very difficult to describe these things without referencing back to numbers, but I'll try to keep it simple. So first thing about property is a high yield and consistent cash flow. And by that, what I mean is that compared to, let's say, the equivalent stocks. And I'll give you an example. So let's say, for example, you want to buy, and I'll put you guys in the car seat, so you can kind of see and understand it from a better perspective, from your own individual perspective. Let's say you find a house, it's 200K. And let's say that house rents out for £1,000. Your mortgage on that house is £600, let's say, for example. So you profit about £400 per month, a year. Per a year, that's £4,800 per year. Now you have to pay the tax man, he's cut. The good old majesty, or well, now it's not the majesty, it's his king. He's cut, and that's like £960 a year. Now at the net, so net cash going into your pocket is £3,840 per year. Now, when you buy a property, you don't pay £200,000 for it, you put a deposit down. So if you're buying a buy-to-let, you're putting down a deposit of 20%. So 20% on 200K is 40K. Now, what I'm trying to do is calculate what the yield is. Now, the yield is a measure of measuring how much money you make per amount of money you invest. So if I buy a house for £100 and it gives me £1 in cash back, I make a yield of 1%. If it's £10 back, I make a yield of 10%. In this case scenario, I'm making an income of £3,840 per year net after tax. I put down 40% deposit because the house is 200K. My yield is 9.5%. Now, I don't know any stock that does that. Now, the question I have here is that's £3,840. Now, imagine if you times that by 10. Now you're no longer working. Now, if you're no longer working, then you have to work back the maths to figure out, well, how many properties do I need to buy to get to that 38K? So you need to buy 10 properties to do that. So that's 400K. And this is a question I want to chuck back to Jax, is how much do you need to buy in stocks? You need to spend in stocks to generate 38K a year. I'll leave it to you, Jax.
I want to do maths. Well, all right. So whatever the income you're looking for per month, you need to obviously multiply that by 12. You get the yearly amount. You divide that by 0.04 because generally speaking, when you get a portfolio of things like stocks, you can withdraw. You can draw down 4% from that without actually you losing the value of the actual nest egg. So you're right in the sense that you would need to have a much bigger pot to be able to become financially free in terms of the income being able to pay for your lifestyle relative to property, because obviously property you use leverage. and that's a very fair point. I think that's one of the biggest pros for property, in the sense that you tend to usually take out a mortgage. You take out a mortgage, and then it's cheap borrowing as well because it's pegged against an asset property.
Yeah.
Okay, so you said how many properties you need to.
I've still got my point. I knew you were
Oh, you
going to
still
say
got
that.
points. Oh, okay.
I still knew you were going to say
Let
that.
me let you go.
You know what? I knew you were going to say that, so I actually did the answer for you.
Oh.
So the yield of 1.69%, just generally the yield on properties and stocks. Now, you would need £2.2 million to generate that income of 38k.
Mm-hmm.
That's nearly 5 times what you need for property.
Yeah.
I let the math speak for itself.
Well, okay. Yes and no, because what you've spoken about here is leverage. Again, regardless of whatever asset you're talking about, you can always still leverage from other assets. So in the stock market, you can leverage using margin. Okay, you can leverage using margin. There are people out there that will invest in stocks and shares by taking out what we call derivatives, so doing options and futures contracts. And if they get it right, they can do by far better than your properties. Imagine somebody who took out margin and invested in Amazon 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or Facebook, or Netflix, or any of those companies, or PayPal, or any one of those companies. They would have done much better than your houses. What's going to do better? A good business or some buildings, bricks and mortar?
Well, we're going into business. I thought we were talking about stocks.
Stocks are businesses.
They're businesses, but they're shares. Because I think you might have missed the point where I said consistent. I said consistent cash flows. Every month I get paid. I get paid.
Until the tenant decides not to pay you.
No. And the reason why the tenant doesn't decide to pay you, no offense, is because the people that are finding the tenants aren't doing a rigorous process. Mm-hmm. When you find a good tenant, there's a process you have to go through to find a tenant. It's a rigorous process. And so if you're finding a tenant for quick cash, it's not going to work out well. But if you rigorously review your tenants and review their pay and their work history, and also get references from the previous landlords, then it reduces the risk. But I think that's a good point. You touched on one point there, which I wanted to touch on, which was, and I think this is my second point, which I wanted to highlight, which was you don't need to exit your position to realize the gain. And you talked on leverage debts. Now, you talk to people obviously dealing with margin and buying derivatives and various other things. In order for them to get the cash, they still need to exit their position. Someone needs to sell. I don't need to sell. I can still generate more and use that cash. And I'll give you an example. Let's say, for example, that 200K house that I bought, just a figurative house, I add value. And that's one of the other points I'm going to mention earlier, but I thought I'd mention it now. So I add value, it's now worth 300K. Now, generally, if it was a stock, I'd have to sell it to make that 100K profit, whatever it may be. But as a property, I can borrow against it. I can leverage. And so I can take that money out. And guess what? I can buy another property. I still own the same property. And now I've got 2 properties generating cash flow. So the argument to me for property is, and this is one of the biggest strengths, is the ability to be able to leverage against it without the need to have to sell it, which I just don't think is the case with stocks.
Interestingly, just speaking about selling and that kind of stuff, actually, as an individual, I believe in buy and hold, right? So when I buy shares in businesses, that's what stocks are. I aim to hold them. If I could hold them forever, I would, right? As long as the fundamentals make sense, I would like to hold them forever, okay? Now, you mentioned leverage, and you mentioned leverage as one of the biggest pros for property. Mm-hmm. But the thing about leverage, the thing about debt, and I know there's this whole ideology of good debt, bad debt. But I'm a Christian, and in the Bible, I don't see anywhere it says that debt is a good thing. But what it does say is that when you take out debt, you become a slave to the borrower, okay? People say things like, okay, there's good debt, there's bad debt, and we know in personal finance, one of the key things in personal finance, if anyone's ever read a personal finance book, one of the key fundamentals they say is pay yourself first, right? Everyone's heard of that before. I think the book that I read first that said it was Richest Man in Babylon. Pay yourself first, pay yourself first, pay yourself first. How do you pay yourself first when the first person that takes money out of your thing is the person that you owe? Someone has seniority over your money that you're making, your so-called cash flow. Somebody has seniority. You have to pay that person back before you make a profit. Now, by taking out debt, what you're really doing is you're increasing your level of risk for a high potential return. That's what debt is. You're increasing your risk for a high potential return. But the thing about risk sounds amazingly well, and it sounds great. And good debt. Oh, good debt. When we live in a macroeconomic system where there's cheap money around, there's cheap money, the government's printing money. Everybody's a property investor. Everybody's Instagram page, I'm a property investor. Everybody's doing property. People are using Help to Buy schemes. I'm a homeowner at the age of 21 because I've got to put a 5% deposit. Okay, all right. But what you don't understand is you've taken out risk. You have taken out what we call interest rate risk. And as we can see from our dear government, and as we can see from the macroeconomic situation that we find ourselves, that risk can really, really, really come to bite you if you don't manage it properly. It can really, because what happens is as soon as interest rates increase, that debt, that so-called good debt that you owe, you're still a slave to the person who gave you that money. You didn't buy the house, the bank bought the house, and you have to pay the bank back. And if you don't pay the bank back, they're going to take the house from you.
Bro, it's a business. That's how business works. You generate a profit. That is all I'm doing, is running a business and generating a profit. And then I'm using that to generate more profit and more cash flow. That is how it works. It's a business. So the points you made are very valid because it's a business. I borrow. So what a business does is it provides a service at a cost and sells a service for a price that less than it costs to produce that service. So I'm buying a property, getting debt, and I'm able to rent that property for more than the debt and the cost of service that property is, and I generate profit. And guess what? I use that to buy more.
You hope so.
I use that to buy more. So your argument is void because that is what business is. That's what business is. It's to provide a service sell at a price that's higher than the cost of delivery. That's what landlords do. That's what property is in the fundamental sense. That's what you and I mentioned, I said that at the beginning. That is what it is. It's a business. So
I think there's definitely interesting points on both sides. And I think with any investment, and we always touch on this, there's always going to be a level of risk as well associated with it, which you both touch on really well. I am just at this point, if that's all right, just going to go through some questions. I am going to go through what's in the chat box, but if any of you have any questions on your heart that you want to say off mute, just put your hand up, virtual hand up, or even if you just want to clarify anything, because there might be some words that have been thrown around that you've probably not heard of or anything, so feel free to do that. So I am just going to run through okay, just going scripture. Let me just see. Oh, yes, a question from Ade. How do you, maybe for you, Pelumi, how do you know if you are buying, to quote, too much house?
Buying too much house is too much. Do you mean too much houses or?
Well, too much house. How do you know if you're putting way too much money or over leveraging when it comes to buying, investing in property?
I think that question came when Pelumi was talking about the monopoly.
Exactly.
Yeah. How do you know when you're buying too much house and you don't know that you're going to run out of money and then you're going to land on someone's property and you're going to take all your money, you're going to go bankrupt and lose the monopoly game. Just saying.
Yeah. So there's a famous Bible verse that says the end of a thing is better than the beginning of a thing. In property, I know what the property is going to achieve before I even buy it. I've done my due diligence. I've done my research. I know what it rents for. I've spoken to agents. I know what the values of the properties around that area are. I've spoken to the banks. I've spoken to the brokers. I've spoken to the solicitors. Before I lay down one single penny, I've gathered all the information I know and need to be able to quantify and verify how much I will make at the end of it. And this is the problem. Some people just don't do that and they buy it and then they lose money and then they say property is a risk and all that stuff. No, it's not a risk. You just made a mistake. You didn't do your research, your homework properly. So the best way to do it is that's how I ensure. That's how I haven't been able to make a mistake yet. It's because I've been very thorough on my analysis. So if I see a property and I see a problem with it, I just don't buy it. I get it surveyed. I get verification. I get some certainty. I reduce the risk, and that's how I'm able to be in a position where I am today, where I've, thankfully, by the grace of God, and I'll continue to be, that I no longer have those problems. I don't have these issues that a lot of other landlords are facing because they try to take a shortcut.
Brilliant. No, thank you for that, Pelumi. Another question, and yes, I've seen your hands up, so please do keep them up. But another question from KC. I think you was giving an example on income yield, etc. Where can I find a 200k property that will give me 1k rental income?
East Sussex.
East Sussex. Cool. KC, that's an area for you to look at. And others. Another one from Ade, but aren't you taxed more and more with every consecutive property you buy? With stocks, you're only taxed on realized gains.
Oh, can you wait for my points later on?
Okay, we'll hold that.
Wait for later on.
But Ade, we'll hold that. Please leave that for now.
I will leave it. I'll leave it.
On that note, Ade, you've got your hand up. Do you want to come off mute if you still need to ask your question?
Yeah. So there was a couple of statements made regarding mortgage rates. I think someone said something about mortgage rates or whatever. So what I want to know is that if you have multiple properties, you have multiple mortgages. In an economic climate like this where rates have gone up, right? How does a property investor manage all of those mortgages, or are they all on fixed terms, or are they all variable? Like what?
Basically, what they're saying, how does someone manage all that debt, all that money they have to pay someone else?
Yeah, no, I hear you. Before the interest rates started rising, I was already looking at rates. I plan, I see everything. So before the Bank of England, myself and my wife, before the Bank of England started raising interest rates, I called my broker and I said, I'm going to start looking at my rates. And I paid early redemption fees. So when you pay your mortgage early, you pay your early redemption fee. But when I did the numbers and I looked at what the Bank of England rates were going to go up to, I said, actually, I saved money in the long run by paying those fees. So I paid like $3,000 on one house, but I saved like $7,000 because of my mortgage interest rate payments. So the key is to act fast. And if I'm buying a property now, what I do is when I remodel the property, I model for the fact that the interest rates would rise. What if the interest rates will go up to this, etc. If the property is still profitable, it's kind of like you stress test it. If the property is still profitable, then to me, and the maths makes sense, you've done your due diligence, you've been thorough in your research, you've spoken to all the agents, etc. Then what are you waiting for? Just go for it. And that's how I've been able to avoid this sort of landscape of issues. To be honest, it's really the consumer market that's really suffering from the mortgage interest rate. All landlords locked out ages ago. They paid early redemption fees. They locked out ages ago. Landlords are locked out for like 5 years. So landlords aren't really feeling the massive effects. There's some are because who've made mistakes, but quite a few have taken advantage of that commercial understanding. Have locked out their rates. My broker, when I spoke to him, he was like, yeah, a lot of landlords are calling us. I was like, yeah, make sure you make me first, get me my deals first. So all my property's been locked up for like 5 years or so. I'm going to just ride his wave.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Pelumi. I'm just going to capture KC's and Ife's point. You gave that example around, I think, getting rental income per year of like profit of like just under 4K. Talk to us a bit more about some of those unforeseen costs and things that you need to fix, tenant issues and stuff. Just, to give people a bit of a flavor. Because we're obviously not going, we'll get that in profit, but we're obviously not going to see all of that because a lot of it will go down on costs.
Yeah, so you get maintenance costs. Maintenance costs are really pretty much, they're quite random, but generally you try to say like 10%. Like one of my tenants, they broke the window handle, literally snapped it off. So what kind of Hercules hands have you got for you to smash? You cracks a window handle. But anyway, he broke the window handle and I was like,
my stocks and shares.
But I would generally say about 10%.
Cool.
Is generally what you have to forecast, but sometimes it's a give and take. Sometimes the property, if the property is well maintained, it reduces the risk. Generally, when the property is poorly maintained, you have more failures. If it's well maintained, you reduce the failures. So I invest in good tradesmen to take care of my property. That when they go in, they let me know what problems before they happen. Because to me, if the problem gets worse, it's going to become more expensive. So I'd rather pay a premium now to fix it than a bigger cost later down the line. And that's what happens when maintenance costs get quite unsustainable and large. But I thought, just to go back to the original question, I'll say cost about 10%.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, bro. We're going to go to round 2, but before we do that, we're going to take one more question. If you have your hands up, feel free to keep it up still. And then also in the chat box, please do keep them coming. But I'm going to take a question from Sar A, who's got your hand up. Yes.
Yeah, thanks for that. My question is to Pelumi. So I have 2 questions. What's your take on interest-only mortgages? And the second one is, if I had money to buy a property cash down, what areas would you recommend that I can get a cheap property? Thank you.
Interest only mortgages are the mortgages that all my properties are interest only mortgages. I don't do repayment mortgages. The only repayment mortgage I do is on my own property, my property where I live. The reason why is the key is you want to maximize cash flow, so you can acquire more. I can't get into the details of the maths behind it, but actually it's the much more effective way to boost your cash flow is to go on interest only mortgage, and that means that you reduce your monthly payments, you're able to build cash, and then you also get a better benefit of the great gain of capital appreciation as well. So I generally tend to just do that, and that's generally a widespread industry sort of process. I forgot, sorry, you mentioned there was another question that you mentioned.
It was about buying a property cash down for cheap.
Yeah,
if I had about, let's say, 50 grand and I intended to buy a property, I just wanted to buy it cash down, where would you recommend to look at? Or is that a bad idea?
Never buy cash down. Never buy property cash down. The reason why is that the key property is to try and minimize how much you put in. If I could buy a property for £1, that means that my gains are infinite. If I could buy a property for nothing, my gains are infinite. Like our parents could get properties for 100% mortgage. That means that every pound you make on top of that was infinite. You didn't put any money in. The key is not to put money down. The key is to reduce how much money you put in. So I wouldn't try to put in 5. I wouldn't try to put in 50K. I would try and put in £1 if I could. But obviously, with your budget, if you were to split that out and invest in a number of properties, you could probably buy about 4 or 5 properties up north. You're looking further up north. You're not looking further down south, but you can generate good yields. You're looking at probably areas like because I researched geographically all areas, because to me property is the key. Like I just research. So you're looking at areas like York, Pendle, those like sort of northern areas. That's what you're looking for. But if you were to invest in those areas, I would suggest look for those areas that have got good capital appreciation, not just good cash flow, because you want your money to grow.
I just want to jump in quickly, just to let you guys know, everyone on the call, to know that this is recorded, and whilst we can give you, myself, Jackson, Pelumi, and Peter can give you our opinions, what we can't give you is what we call regulated financial advice. So everything that we speak about, do understand that is based on our opinions, and it's here for a laugh and for education and that kind of stuff.
True to that.
Disclaimer right there. And on that note, we're gonna go into the final round. So we're gonna do the pretty much same thing again, but Jax, this time your final 3 points that you want to touch on, if you don't mind.
So for that reason, I'll talk about that very quickly and then go into my first point, because it's kind of linked. So you're talking about leverage and that kind of stuff. Now, what you will remember when we talk about property is buying property under an SPV, especially purpose vehicle or under a business, has actually become a more recent thing because of what we call Section 21. Is it long to explain? If you know, you know. If you don't, you don't know it. But to cut a long story short, the reason for that, what it was, is because it made buying property in your own name much more expensive, right? To tax, keyword tax, right? There's a saying, some remember what they're saying. There's 2 guarantees in life. One is death, and the other one is you're going to pay tax. And with property, the tax man is there ready to take as much as he or she can possibly take. But to talk about leverage with businesses, remember, even when I'm assessing businesses, which again, stocks are shares in businesses, there is an analysis process, right? You look at a company's financial statements, you look at the income statement, balance sheet, you look at their cash flow sheet. And when you look at their balance sheet, you can see how much debt they have, okay? But when you look at business, they've got that LTD at the end. It's called limited liability. Limited. So as long as the business can borrow however much it wants, and it can leverage, and it can do really, really well, and it can benefit just like how you benefit from your so-called business. But if it goes bankrupt, the taxman is not going to go and chase the actual business owner for their money. It's down to the business. The business goes bankrupt, it goes to zero, it's done. They're not going to chase you and your family for your money. With property, if you don't buy it under the business structure, which many people didn't do and are now rushing to do so, you are actually going to lose your money. They're going to come chasing down for your money. Correct me if I am wrong. And so that leads me to one of my points for this round, is the tax efficiency, which is a big one for me, actually. It might be one of the biggest one, alongside diversification and liquidity. But a tax efficiency, or being able to invest in stocks and shares in a tax efficient ways, using things like stocks and shares ISAs, lifetime ISAs, and pension accounts, is second to none. right? So you can invest in stocks and shares in a well-diversified way, in a tax-efficient way. For your pension, the money you get paid from your business, the money you get paid from your job, can go into stocks and shares gross, not net. So before the taxman takes a cut, you can actually take that money and move it into your pension account and invest in stocks and shares and other financial assets in a very, very tax-efficient way. And of course, with stocks and shares assets, you can, yes, the money that goes in is net, right? But it can grow tax-free. So the dividends are not taxed, the capital appreciation is not taxed as well. In the UK, the government gives us an allowance every tax year, April the 6th to April the 5th the following year. For example, the stocks and shares ISA is £20,000. Amongst ISAs generally is £20,000. You and I and everyone in this call can invest up to £20,000 into our stocks and shares ISA. And anything that happens, it can grow, we can get dividends, it can grow capital appreciation, we can earn all these returns, and there's no tax to pay. There's no, you gotta pay stamp duty, you gotta pay, it grows tax efficient. And that's the same case for a pension as well. So I think the tax efficiency is a huge one. And someone mentioned in the chat, when it comes to property, the tax man is just there, ready to eat from your pot, your leveraged pot. Should I go to my second one, or should I let Pelumi go on? I'll probably come back to my second one.
Go for it, bro. Just close to the tie. Go for it, Jack.
Okay, my second one is actually very similar to something I mentioned earlier when it comes to diversification, and it comes down to risk. Everything comes down to risk. Here I'm talking about regulatory risk. I think we all know deep down, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, and the audience are allowed to share their ideas, but generally speaking, the government don't want you and I to be landlords. They don't want it. So they're making it more expensive, making it more of a headache to become a landlord. For that reason, when you invest in this highly leveraged asset, where you borrow a lot of money, sometimes even, you try to, as Pelumi said, you want to put £1 down. I think some people have amnesia what caused the financial crisis of 2007. It was these things, people taking out excessive loans that they couldn't actually afford. But that's a conversation for another day. Is when you take out these loans, what if the government decide to change the regulation just like that? And it's happened. It's happened. What happens is if you buy 10, 20 properties and say, oh, look at my portfolio, they beat their chest, I've got 20 portfolios, all in my own name, assets. And the government come and say, okay, section 21. Okay, section this, section this, a whole bunch of sections. There's section. All of a sudden, that your tenants are so protected. That tenant that you did the research on, but has had a change of heart because his girlfriend left him, and then you know, and then all these things happen. Now you have to sell your properties. You have to pay all these taxes. It's a huge headache. Whereas once you've locked in that stocks and shares ISA, even when they change the regulation, they usually change it for the years coming after that. So they'll say, if you have this stocks and shares are from this year to this year, then okay, that's locked in, right? It's locked in, and that's really, really, really important. And that's one of my cases for also going more into a nice liquid asset where you're investing in a business, great businesses with great, amazing leaders that scale. And that's actually my third point. But Peter said we haven't got much time, but the scalability of a business is really important. But Peter, I know you said 3 or 4, but I have to finish this guy. I have to finish him. And the way I'm going to finish him is pure and simple. Earlier on, he said facts. Everybody likes facts when it's gone their way, right? And there's one fact that kills all. When we look at the returns, the absolute returns, the compounded and the growth rate, all that stuff, the returns, stocks and shares have outperformed property over the past 100 years. And it's easy to understand. How is that possible? Because what's going to do better? A piece of a building or the best business? The best building or the best business? Which one's going to do better? And that's up to you to decide. Thank you very much.
Jackson, you definitely rehearsed that.
I really didn't. I'm just gassed. I feel like I'm on one of those, what's that thing called? The political debates.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
Over to you.
That's okay. Thank you for that, Jax. Pelumi, you've heard obviously quite a few points from Jax, obviously with his finale just now as well, and touching on things like regulatory risk, tax efficiency, and of course, his final point. But did you have any comeback to that before you want to go into your points? I know you've got comeback because I can see all your reactions.
So tax is valid.
That's
Okay.
no, thank you for that, Jax. Pelumi, you've heard obviously quite a few points from Jax, obviously with his finale just now as well,
Yeah.
and touching on things like regulatory risks, tax efficiency, and of course his final point. But did you have any comeback to that before you want to go into your points? I know you've got comeback because I can see all your reactions.
So tax is valid. When I did that analysis before at the start of the conversation, I actually mentioned tax. Like you pay your tax and you have to give King Charles his cut because you're operating on these patch, and I still made more money. So unfortunately, it still made more money in terms of description compared to what I'd have to do if I had to buy a stock. So to me, it rebutes that argument. But the regulatory challenges is a big risk because it's very much dependent on which government comes to power. Tories tend to be more aligned with the sort of investor approach. Labour tend to be less aligned. So it does depend, and it's something you can't forecast or plan. That's why when you want to buy a property, the only way you can mitigate that is by buying a property that generates a good cash flow and it's got good capital appreciation, because then you're protected from any changes or new legislation the government may bring in. That is one thing that I would say is a question mark. You can't plan because it's dependent on the government. They may change things or various things, but what you can do is minimize that risk by going for the best performing assets wherever possible. So that's one point. But going back, there's also one other thing which Jack said, which was money. We buy stocks with the money you get paid from your job. When you own property, you don't buy property with the money you earn from your job. You buy properties from the money that your properties make you. So the key is that I can't do that with stocks. I can't buy more stocks from the money I made from my stocks. I can buy more property from the money that my properties make, because the cash flow is so sufficiently large and high that I don't need to have a job to do it. That's the argument I'm trying to make. I'm not trying to smack it out of the water, but it's like a home run, bro. The argument is just void. But with regards to stocks outperform property. Now, stocks may have outperformed property in capital appreciation. Yes, that's true. But cash generation, that's false. The reason why I buy property, and this is one, I think people don't really understand how landlords think sometimes. It's really important to kind of give it that. We don't buy property for capital appreciation. We buy property for cash flow. It's the cash. It's the flow of money and the consistency of that flow of money that allows us to be able to buy more and more and more and more in scale. It's the cash. I can have a property that's got a lot of amounts of capital appreciation. However, I can have a stock, that's got a lot of capital appreciation, but I have to sell it to be able to get that cash. I can hold it, the property, I can hold it, it still pays me cash, and I get the benefit of capital appreciation at the same time. So, although Jax, your argument is valid to an extent, that is if you're looking at it on a sort of apples for apples basis. As a property investor, we don't look at it, we buy the whole tree. So that's my argument.
I can see Jax is one to come in on that cash flow bit around stocks. But Jax, over to you.
Go to you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a false argument, because not all stocks are the same. We have different types of stocks. You've got different types of businesses. You've got the businesses that in the early stages of their growth model, which can bring a huge amount of capital appreciation, and then you've got these companies that have been around for a very long time, and they provide a cash flow. They're profitable businesses. They provide cash flow in the form of dividends. Oh, let me just check my phone.
2.2 million. 2.2 million.
No. I mean, this month I've received £100 in dividends alone. That's Cash flow. And
This month I've received thousands.
Yeah, but I mean, you got a bit more money.
I see thousands.
No, but all jokes aside,
I'm not trying to be humble, just be humble. But I had to argue his argument against his argument.
No, but all jokes aside, yes, you can earn a cash flow from investing in stocks as well. It depends on the type of business you invest in. You will have to invest in a business that's been around for a very long time, and that business in itself has to produce a lot of cash flow. So you can actually assess that by looking at a company's cash flow statement. Look at the bottom bit, you see something called free cash flow that shows how much cash the company's actually producing and being able to keep. So yeah, you can also produce a cash flow by investing in dividend-paying stocks. If that business is a great business as well, not only do they pay a cash flow, they grow the amount of cash flow they're paying you as well. So you can I understand what you're saying in the sense that most, in fact, yeah, I would say probably 90% of landlords invest in property for the cash flow. But yes, you can earn a cash flow by investing in dividend-paying stocks. And if you're intelligent with it and diligent with it, if you invest it in a tax-efficient way, like I have, then the dividends, the cash flow that you're getting paid are also tax-free. So even though the cash flow might not come in bulk, it comes in tax-free and it can grow and grow and grow over the years. So that's my response to that.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Jax. And thank you, Pelumi. I'm going to go over to you, Pelumi, to round up on your 3 points as well.
So my 3 points was, Jax, you touched on this as well briefly, which was the growth in the stocks. The growth, capital appreciation in the stocks now. Property does not grow as fast as stocks in terms of capital appreciation now, but you can add value that makes it grow faster. But that's another point I'll go on the later date. But one of the things about property is its stability and consistency. It's not volatile. And I'll say this in a way, and I'll describe this in a way. This is the best way. During COVID, what happened to the stocks? Guess what? As a property investor, I still got paid. During the war in Ukraine and Russia, what happened to stocks? As a property investor, guess what? I still got paid. Now, the Bank of England, Kwasi Kwarteng, the Chancellor, wants to bankrupt the country. What happens to stocks? Guess what? I still got paid. Stocks, property is stable. Stocks are speculative and volatile. Short term, the price for property isn't quoted every minute, every second. Property is. So although the growth of capital appreciation isn't as rapid, the fact that it's stable means that you can plan and build for the future much more easily because it's predictable. And that's what you need. All businesses have to plan for the future. So to me, the key is that now, not to say that prices of properties may not fall in the future. There's no doubt about that. But even with all the calamity, we went through a global pandemic. What happened to properties? They went up. They went up. I made myself and my wife made quite a bit of money off properties. That's why we're looking to buy more now. So regardless of the changes in the market, we are not susceptible to them as easily and responsive to them as easy as, let's say, stock investors. So I'm sure Jax's portfolio is positive right now, given the state of the market. I'm sure a lot of stock investors here are anyone's a stock investor is probably feeling the burn. Maybe the balance is in red. But me as a property investor, I haven't been touched. And actually, in fact, I'm taking advantage of it. I'm buying more. So unfortunately, the argument is really difficult to make on that sense. So that's one of the things. And because of that, it's one of the best inflation hedges.
Yes, it is.
It's an inflation hedge. Because it's consistent, the price is stable and it'll consistently grow in the future. I know it will always hedge inflation. And so that's why it will go up. And they're not building, stock property has a very low stock to flow. That means they're not building enough. They can't build enough. So the price will always grow because there's always going to be demand. They're just not building enough of them. So that's one of the reasons why. That's the second point I want to make is, and I mentioned this previously, is the ability to add value. When you buy a stock, you're on the ride. You've bought a ticket and you're just going for a ride. The train driver determines where the destination is. When I buy a property, I'm the train driver and I tell you where to get on and get off. And the reason why is because I have control. When you buy a stock, you have a stock. People don't realize it's a vote. I think sometimes people see it as equity, but it's a vote. You have a vote. Now, unless you've got a large number of those votes, you have very little control. You literally just go where the stock goes. If it goes up, you go up. If it goes down, you go down with it. It's your decision where you get off on or off. With property, the reason why I'm the train driver is because I can buy a property for 200K and look at how I can add value to it to make it worth 300. The key is to add value to it at a rate. The key is to add the cost to add the value has to be less than the cost to produce it. So the price of the value has to be less than the cost to produce it, and then I generate profit. That's why I buy a house now. I buy it for 200K. I do up the kitchen, paint it, put some floors down. It's now worth that cost me 30K. I spent 200. I spent 30K. However, the value of the house has gone up to 280K. I mean, I've made a very good 50% profit. So it's made 50K off putting 30K down because I had the control, and that's one of the things I think that's one of the struggles with stocks is that you may not necessarily agree with what the CEO is doing, but the thing is you can't do anything about it because you're a spectator.
You can sell.
Again, I don't have to sell to realize my gains.
But you have to evict tenants. You have to evict tenants now.
I don't have to sell to realize. But and my final point, and this is one that's really important to me, and I don't think it's something that I think a lot of people on here will probably realize. I'm not too sure this is really is generational wealth. I grew up in a council estate. Not to get personal, but I think it's important. Grew up in council estate, single mother, all that stuff like that. And I went to school and I knew people that really had affluent lives or had an advantage because their parents had assets or had certain finances in place in order that mean they gave them a competitive advantage. And so they were able to do things much more faster, much more early than I was able to. And I vowed that said that my children will not go through that same thing. My children and my wife will not go through that same thing. And so property, and the reason why I like it so much is because I can pass it down to my children and they can pass it down to theirs and theirs and theirs and theirs. And the reason why I can pass it down because I know that that house can last hundreds of years. And the reason why it lasts hundreds of years because it's already worth hundreds of years. It's already hundreds of years old before I bought it. And I know it'll be well here, well after I'm gone and providing value to my family well after I'm gone. And although I may not be able to receive it, the Bible says a good man provides inheritance for his children's children's children. It doesn't even say your kids, it says your kids' kids. And to me, that's very important because it means that generation after me will not have to go through the struggles or torments and issues that I had to as a child. And to me, the best thing I can do as a father is provide my child with a boost, which I didn't get when I was their age. So there's got nothing to do with the finances. To me, that's a more personal matter.
Straight legacy.
Straight legacy, bro. Yeah. Straight legacy.
Companies, you can just take look at stocks, just say it.
Companies they go for a cycle. They go for a period of growth, maturity, then decline. Okay, I'll give you an example. Look at Nokia. Where's Nokia? Well, it's Apple. Was Apple still going to be there after her? Well, I don't know. Apple's not really playing up that well. Look at all the car companies like Ford and thing. Now, after that, Tesla's coming in.
Yeah.
So,
Pelumi, can I pause you for a minute because I know time is going, but I just want to respond to that because I've seen a question that I don't want to lose my thought. The question was asking something about Peter. Do you want to read it out? Something about businesses going out. Let me read it out. Give me 1 second. I think I saw it quickly. It says, Jacques, how can stocks be the best investment model over a 100-year period when businesses, stocks and shares are piece and they come in and out of existence, etc., etc. So that's similar to what you're saying, right? Like Nokia, BlackBerry, all this kind of stuff. But I just don't want to lose my thought. I know we're kind of running out of time. But what I want to say to that is, remember, it's how we buy stocks, right? And I think that's really important, and we'll talk about later, is all these assets and how you do it. So the most common way that I'm sure you agree for the average person to invest in stocks and shares is to buy a well-diversified portfolio, like buying an index fund, right? What a lot of people don't know about buying an index fund is it's passively managed. So if you buy into the S&P 500, for example, which has historical terms of doing well over the past 100 years, is what happens is there's a relegation battle for those that watches football. If the 99th company is not doing well, and the 100th company is not doing well, and the 101th company does well and outshines it, it overtakes it, right? So then what happens is that fund manager will relegate the 100th company and bring in the 101. And that's how companies still stay afloat. So I hope that really answers the question. I didn't want to lose that thought. But that's why when you talk about legacy, I think it's a similar conversation. So you can invest in like an index fund and know that it's going to be taken care of by that relegation battle.
It's you could apply it the same. Obviously, like companies have a shorter lifespan than property. Property could be around well after 100. When I buy a property, I don't buy it thinking I buy it thinking this is my great grandkids. If you know what I mean, that's kind of like the way I look at it. But with stocks, you can't really apply that methodology because this company may not be around. There's very few companies that are around that have been around for over 100 years and are still profitable. Generally, they're just ticking along. New entries and technology changes, the times change, the systems changes. So these new companies are created and they consume the market share of these older companies. And so it's very difficult for you to be able to invest passively over the decades, over the centuries in a company. You just can't do it. You have to exit the position and then someone has to make a decision of what to buy next. Where with a property, just give it to them and say, it's yours. And they say, okay, give it to the next kid, give it to the next one, give it to the next one, and they'll go on generations. And that's, to me, is where you see a lot of these families that are extremely wealthy, is because the reason why is because their great grandfathers bought land. That's the fact. It's just the truth. So
their own businesses.
Their own businesses, but they bought land. They bought land.
I'm gonna come in there, just cautious of time. But Pelumi, Jacques, you finished on a grand finale, and your last point, Pelumi, around just generational wealth, that was brilliant. So now, thank you very much for that. Really, really insightful. Before I do go open for a final round of questions, do you have anything burning that you just wanted to challenge or raise or comments to what you've heard from Pelumi?
Oh no, you guys know me. I can go back and forth. I can challenge everything that he said. That saying I still got paid. Yes, I still got paid through dividends too. We can go back and forth. But I think we're cautious of time, and I really want us to get into the questions of course that we have. Yeah.
And also for our audience here as well, a lot of this is so you can, of course, go up and continue doing your own research as well. So I'm going to go to the questions in the chat box. But before I do that, I know the person that has 2 question marks, no name, has had their hand up for a while.
Hello there. Hi.
Go for it.
Hello there. Hi. Good evening, everybody. Do you know what? For some reason, I can't even change the question mark. So forgive me. And I don't want to come on camera because I'm not that handsome and I'm a bit embarrassed. So
no worries, man. Let me know your name. I'll change it for you whilst you're talking.
Just call me L from London.
From London.
Jax is probably recognizes my voice, but anyway. It's a very interesting debate. I'll just very quickly because I know it's conscious of time. I am a property investor. I want to give props to Jax actually because he got me looking into the whole stocks and shares thing a couple of years ago, and he guided me through things. So I'm going to give a little bit of a recommendation to Jax, who was very, very useful, gave me a lot of good information. I've been doing it a bit more seriously since. Okay, right. So I want to just address a couple of points. Number one, the issue about property and defining what property investment is. I think perhaps it hasn't been clear enough because there are different ways that you can invest in property. It sounds like, is it Pelumi?
Yes.
It sounds like Pelumi is a buy-to-let investor. But actually, buy-to-let is not the only thing that you can do, guys. There's buy-to-let. You can do property development, which is a lot more complicated. You can obtain land. You can, properties, even hotels.
Yeah.
You've got Airbnb. Right? Yeah. So there's so many different ways that you can invest in property. So I think sometimes when we compare property investing to investing in stocks and shares, property is a bit too broad. And I think sometimes we've got to be a little bit more specific, but just something that I picked up. That's number one. Number two, Jack's talked about Section 21. Okay. And he talked about the tax. What it is basically is
Section 24. I think that's what
Section 24. Yeah. So you pay, it was Section 24. You pay tax on your income, whereas every other business in the whole wide world pays tax on their profits. That's the issue. Section 21 is about making it harder for us landlords to evict our tenants. And trust me, it's going to get even harder in the next year or so.
That's the regulation risk I was referring to.
Yes. Okay. In summary, what I would say is, so very good points between both Jax and Pelumi. My thing is, if you can get to a point where you've got enough cash and got enough knowledge, it's very, very important to have the knowledge as well. Do both. Do both. And that's what I've got to say. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that. Really appreciate that. Just going through the questions, and then we're going to get final words from yourself, Jackson Pelumi, and Elle from London. That was very useful because I know they're going to touch a bit on that as well. But what Mira has said, what type of investment are you more in control of? Because to me, with stocks, you're more reliant on others, whereas property, that's down to you. I think we kind of touched on that a tiny bit. Yeah. I think Pelumi answered that. It's definitely much more property. Because you can add value, and you generally own the majority of the actual asset. So it's definitely property. But I think just to counter that, actually some of the reasons why some people invest in stocks is because they don't want the control. They want to outsource the control to the most amazing business owners and CEOs in the world, through like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. So yes, you have much more control in property, but some people actually don't want that control, and they want it to be passive because someone said, and I believe it was my wife, we have full-time jobs. So cool. Brilliant. Maybe this one for you, Pelumi. Henna said, with the cost of living at the moment, how are the property investments dealing with the cost long term?
Property investments or
property investments dealing with the cost long term. I guess, how is the cost of living sort of affecting property investing at the moment?
It's affecting property in the moment is I think there was someone that raised a point about interest. Interest. Unfortunately, I forgot his name. I believe that's probably one of the massive risks for a lot of investors right now. Specifically, is the high interest rates and not tapping them in if you had a chance, and making sure before you're making investments. If you can do higher interest rates. It's just making sure that the investments the investment is actually going to be able to support those high interest rates. The risk in property is all about, the risk isn't in the actual property itself, it's about doing the research and the numbers before you do the property. That's where the risk is. And then it's trying to say that before you put down any money onto a property, you already know what the output of that property is going to be. And that's what you need to minimize, because that then provides, because the key about property, I think Jack's mentioned this, is you don't have illiquidity. You can't get in and out easily. So you have to make sure before you get in, that you've done everything you can to make sure that you know what the output's going to be. So that's where the biggest risk is. I've never really had problems with high cost and this and that, because I've done a lot of the research beforehand to mitigate that risk. And I don't want to sort of blow my own trumpet, but it's really, really about getting knowledge and doing your research before you make those decisions. Before you put any money down, you know what this product's going to produce, what's the output of it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. There's so many questions, so I might not get through to all of them, but what I will do at the end is ask Jackson Pelumi to put their business contact details. So if you've got any questions, you can ask after. But Jackson, I can't remember if you answered, but what happens to your stock if your business goes under?
What happens to the stock if your business goes under? You lose your money. What do you think this is? No joke. So if your business goes bankrupt, remember when you're buying stocks, you're buying a piece of a business, right? You become a part owner of the business. So we actually call it equities in the professional world. What that means is you're taking the same risk as a business owner, right? And you benefit the same as the business owner as well, proportionately. So if the business goes bankrupt, you go bankrupt. If the business does amazingly well, you do amazingly well. That's the simple answer.
Fantastic. A final one. This is from David, very quickly, a university student. Okay, as a young person, a university student, it appears to me that investing in stocks and shares is more feasible than investing in property. Pelumi, what would you say regarding investing into property at a young age with not much capital and already has debt which needs to be paid back, i.e. tuition, fee loans and maintenance loan, uni stuff?
Yeah, so you're gonna have to pay back your uni debt. There's nothing, they take that out before you get to it. So there's nothing you can do about that. With regards to as a university student coming out, the key is what you have on you is something that I think people underestimate, is you have time, you have youth. If there's one thing I could do, it'd be I'll just start investing way earlier. Mm-hmm. That's the one thing I think everyone who invests here regrets not doing it when you're younger. You have the advantage of youth. You're still fresh, you're still young, you're still vibrant. And so what you have, and you have that energy. So the key, I would definitely look at sort of how you can start off. So if you've got youth, you've got time in your hands, I'll start off investing in stocks. What I would do is maybe potentially look at, and sometimes people don't realize they can buy properties with people. You don't need to buy all the property on your own. If I can't afford a property, I partner up with someone, with a family member, a bunch of family members, a cousin, a friend, anyone that you believe you could trust. Obviously, there's legal arrangements that have to put in place to protect your interests and theirs. But there are ways you can actually acquire property without actually having having to have all the cash. I think there's one person that asked me a question about, she's got about 50K and she wants to buy a property. And I said, look, you could buy you could probably put in 10K and go up north. Still on property, you're still getting cash flow. It may not be growing as well as it may be down south, but it's still got cash flow. You can build upon that. The key and the most important key is to acquire the knowledge and then sow that seed. Just don't sit on it. Don't waste those years, mate. Don't waste those years.
I just want to add as well, like if you're that young, and in fact, even if you're not that young and you're inexperienced, and again, even if you are experienced, one thing you can do is get yourself a mentor. I think if you've got someone like Pelumi, would you be my mentor? Yeah, if you have someone who's a bit more experienced, a bit more knowledgeable than yourself, then definitely go under their wings and learn as much as you can. But if you are young, what you have is definitely time, and you have the ability to make mistakes and still recover. So definitely just get started.
Love it, man. Thank you very much, man. And thank you very much for that question. And we're literally going to finish up in about 4 minutes. But before we do that, we're just going to take a quick poll from everyone here. If you don't mind just answering the question that's going to come up on your screens. And it's literally after everything you've heard, it'll just be good to hear from everyone in terms of what side you want. And then we're going to hear a closing statement for our very own Jacques as well. So on the screen, there should be a question that comes up: property investing or stocks or shares? If you can, please do answer. We'll give you probably about 45 seconds.
Peter, can I vote?
So yes, you can vote. It should come up on the screen. Oh, and Jacques and Pelumi, if you don't mind, are you, just in case people have any further questions, feel free to put your business contact details in the chat box as well.
Yeah, I'll do. I think that's Jacques Financial. You lot probably know me already. But also, if you have any young people that are interested in financial education and that kind of stuff, please make sure you get in touch with Walk Finance, of course. But yeah, definitely.
Awesome. So 10 more seconds. I'm going to end the poll. Oh, yes. So the results are... let me just share it. Hopefully you can all see it. So 23% are rooting for stocks and shares and 77% are rooting for property. Now, that does not reflect the nature of this discussion at all. It was literally just find out what you are more geared towards. But Jacques, do you want to just close on just in general around just investing in assets in general?
Yeah, so I mean, I think most people by now know this was just a fun debate. As you probably know, I'm indifferent with property and stocks and shares. I knew the challenge that was going to be proposed to me when I had to speak on the stocks and shares side, because I know generally in our community, we know a bit more about property than stocks and shares. And for someone who works in the investment management industry, I realize there's still a lot of lack of knowledge when it comes to investing in financial assets like stocks, shares, bonds, and that kind of stuff as well. So I think it's really important, and I encourage people to learn as much as they can about these financial assets. And of course, property is an asset that we generally feel safe with. Stocks and shares are a bit more liquid, and I think the biggest mistake I see happening a lot of time with financial assets that provide that liquidity is that's the problem. Because it's so liquid, many people try to come in and out. They try to buy it and then sell it for a small amount of money. But you realize generally, if you want to benefit from owning shares and that kind of stuff, you have to think long term. It has to be a long term ideology. So that's something I would say. I would also say when it comes to investing in stocks and shares, again, that liquidity is a problem. So you can see the valuation of your asset every single day as long as the market is open. But I want to highlight, especially everyone listening, if you have invested in stocks and shares and your portfolio might be down tremendously over the past 18 months, remember that the red that you're seeing, the minus whatever percentage you're seeing, that is the current valuation. That is not, you haven't made or lost any money. Nothing's happened in terms of you actually making or losing money. What's actually happening is that the stock market is telling you what it would like to buy your shares of you today. because of the current and projected macroeconomic environment. So it's really important to understand that, not to panic and say, oh, I'm down 20-30%, I've lost all this money. You lost nothing. You'd be silly to actually go and sell to the market your asset that you bought that you really liked for a much cheaper price because of the current economic environment. What I would encourage people to do, and this is my opinion, is actually to think about it as an opportunity. As long as you're able to earn an income, earn money and save money, so you earn, your income is much more higher than your expenses, and you have that residual amount, I would encourage people to start thinking about ways they can invest in a well-diversified portfolio of assets, including property, including stocks and shares, including other asset classes as well. We talk about all the time, there's 5 different asset classes. There's equities, stocks and shares, there's bonds, there's real estate or property, there's alternatives such as infrastructure, precious metals, fine art, cryptocurrencies nowadays, and of course there's cash. Cash is also an important asset class. You need to have some cash, and you need to keep some cash in your portfolio for opportunities as well. So I think I've covered most of it. And one thing I was going to say, I was going to use it in the debate as well, but I think I just use it in the roundup. You can actually buy shares in real estate as well, so you can actually combine both. And if you don't have the capital, if you don't have 30-50K in your bank to buy a property, and you don't want to partner up with friends and buy a physical property, you can actually have access to the real estate market by buying shares in real estate funds or things like real estate investment trusts, also known as REITs and that kind of stuff. And of course, if you have any more questions, hit me up and I'll try to answer. But yeah, well done, Pelumi. I mean, it was a difficult one. I tried my best to back up some shares, but well done.
But Jax, I just want to say, Jax, Peter, thank you. It's an absolute honor to work with you, Jax. Absolutely very highly regarded in the industry and has a wealth of knowledge and information. So thank you very much for bringing me on here. And it was an absolute honor.
No, thank you very much, both, man. You've been really informative, educational, and you've just provided so much value, man. So hopefully we've all gained a lot just by being here, and all for our listeners, when you're listening to this by the time, hopefully you found this really useful as well. So just now, a massive thank you to both, man. God bless you. It's a late Friday night and you're here, so really appreciate it a lot. We are going to pretty much close now. Pelumi, Jax are probably going to be here till 10:30 later, so everyone can choose to go. But if any of you have some burning things that you just want to kind of ask or anything like that, we are here, and this will literally lock off at 10:30. Other than that, thank you very much, everyone. God bless you. Have a good weekend.